This week in South Florida gay news. This is South Florida gay news on Queer News Tonight. I'm reporter John Hayden. In this week's issue, we monitor the attacks on LGBTQ plus rights coming from Governor Ron DeSantis and his legislative Republican supermajority, while looking at how last weekend's March in Heels was a bigger success than expected in getting the message across to Tallahassee. Also, we mourn the loss and look back at the lives of two LGBTQ plus icons, gay South Florida author and entertainer David Lettick, who passed away at the age of 93, and Walter W. Cole, who, at 92 years old, was the world's oldest working drag queen. And this weekend is the annual Diversity Honors Gala presented by the Harvey Milk Foundation, honoring people who carry on the martyred LGBTQ plus civil rights leaders' legacy. It's still at the Guitar Hotel, but it's going to have a splashy new vibe. These stories and much more in this week's edition, on stands and always online. For South Florida Gay News on Queer News Tonight, I'm John Hayden.
Next, let's queer up trans rights. Nebraska lawmaker with trans son tells GOP she's done with them in history-making speech.
And if you don't believe me, if you think I'm going to cool down and change my mind, you should believe me. No one in the world holds a grudge like me. And no one in the world cares less about being petty than me. I don't care. I don't like you. You want welcome in my space. You aren't a safe person for my child to be around, or any child, frankly. Don't believe me? You should. Senator Hughes yesterday was asking all kinds of questions on the microphone, seemingly coming from a place of complete sincerity about how does this care work? Do parents have to consent every time for kids to get gender-affirming care? Questions that had already been answered. And this morning, Senator Frederickson was answering those questions again, and she's sitting under the balcony not listening. So I go over there and I say, he's speaking to you. He's answering the questions that you specifically had that ostensibly were, preventing you from supporting this bill or not. Now she's sitting with Kathleen Kauth, who's probably saying, don't worry, girl, hold strong. We're gonna get those trans kids. Don't worry. Don't listen to Megan. Screw that. Senator Hughes said, well, some people sent me some emails. So I guess some people sent her some emails and she probably definitely read them and took them to heart. So now she knows all the facts about what trans kids go through. One of the most hateful, bigoted, and wrong things that Senator Kathleen Kauth has said during this debate is that trans kids are hurting and sad. She might be right about that, but she's not right about why. The actions of bullies like Senator Kauth is what caused trans kids pain, not the fact that they're trans. Trans kids are normal, but for adults like Kathleen Kauth who harass them, who introduce bills to make their life harder, to make them feel like outsiders when they are not. There's nothing wrong with them. They get good grades, they go to school, they do activities in clubs, they have friends, they date, they have dreams and goals, they get married, they have kids, just like everybody else. Hopefully someday they run for the legislature and they can straighten some people out.
A Nebraska state senator is causing waves in the state legislature after a scathing speech where she told her Republican colleagues that she is done with being polite with them since they're attacking her family, namely her 12-year-old son who is transgender. Senator Megan Hunt, Democrat, said, quote, "My son is trans, and this bill, colleagues, is such an affront to me personally and would violate my rights to parent my child in Nebraska," end quote. She was referring to LB 574, which would ban doctors from providing gender-affirming care to transgender people under the age of 19. The measure includes puberty blockers, meaning that trans youth would have to go through puberty associated with the wrong gender and live with its permanent effects. If this bill passes, the bill is called the Let Them Grow Act and bans certain procedures for transgender youth, but explicitly allows them, if they're performed on intersex youth, to appear more like the sex a doctor assigns to them at birth. Nebraska State Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, Democrat, has been filibustering all bills in Nebraska's unicameral legislature for weeks now, and Hunt has joined her. The legislature meets for 90 days a year, and meaning that if they filibuster until June 9th, then they have killed all legislation for the year. It's very frightening. I heard a lot of the same anecdotes from the legislature session in Tallahassee from friends who attended, and the parents that were there, especially trans parents who were given 30 seconds to testify, 30 seconds. Many of them were not able to testify because they called a vote to, like a closure vote to end the debate. And while the senators on the other side, or the Republican side, I can say that, were some were texting, some were laughing, not paying attention to parents who were testifying and crying. So again, if this is what is designed to help children, this is again gaslighting, that we're trying to help children and we're trying to root out a problem that does not exist.
Well, 30 seconds is longer than Matt Gaetz's sexual encounters. That's another story altogether. I think there's nothing more passionate than when somebody is personally involved, when your family is involved, and you're defending them. And that's what she's doing, and that's what makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I am totally here for her pettiness. I am totally here for her to call out what is happening just off camera to the sides. The people sitting under there texting, laughing, sharing recipes, whatever they were doing. I'm completely here for it because these bills crush kids. They just crush kids. And I would say take away the guns, not their hormones.
Of course, brava, Senator Megan Hunt, for finally speaking up and saying enough is enough. Kudos also to Michaela Cavanaugh.
Yeah, the whole thing is sad. The whole thing is sad. And what is sad to me is that she speaks that way. It's really unbecoming of a senator in Nebraska to speak that way. But what is sad is that she feels that she has been compelled to the edge of her existence because of protection of her own child to have to speak that way. There are no winners in this conversation. There's no right, there is no wrong. We are all losers because of it, and that's what's sad. It seems to me that we have to take a page out of what we're watching in other places in the world. In Georgia, they've brought a stop to the Putin initiative to be more like what Russia did in 2012, and they've been successful. Currently, and we'll continue to watch what's going on in Israel, but over the weekend, the opposition voice of democratic decision-making took to the streets and brought Israel to a complete stop. Malls couldn't operate, planes could not take off or land, and a very sizable percentage of the population of Israel said, you have gone too far in terms of being anti-democratic, and we don't want a Hungarian style or a lesser style of Putin anti-democratic decision-making in Israel. I think we really need a good dose of that. We really have to start to take to the streets. And what that means is we need a good dose of Larry Kramer in the 1990s. ACT UP was a point where we said, look, we can't talk reasonably to these people anymore, so we're going to stop trying to talk to them reasonably. And we're going to have civil protest. I'm not talking about violence, but we're going to have civil protest in words and actions that are commensurate to say, we are going to disrupt the normal legislation or legislative process in Nebraska, where you won't get to pass a single law for all of the entire year because we will filibuster through the entire year. In December, I did an interview that has stuck with me for months and months and months with the idea of what happened in AIDS and Dr. Fauci. And I did the interview with Fauci, and Fauci rings in my ear and has for 3 months. Dr. Fauci talked about Larry Kramer and how much they grew to love each other. And that while Kramer was not approaching AIDS in the way that Dr. Fauci was, he in many respects approached it in better ways because he saved, and the LGBTQ community saved millions of lives by being so demanding through ACT UP as through civil disobedience to bring to a conclusion. And Fauci told a story where Kramer told Dr. Fauci that he should chain himself to the fence of George Bush and at the White House, to the steel fence. Chain yourself to the fence and get attention that NIH is not getting what it should do. And Fauci said to Kramer in a confused way, why would I do that? I'm friends with President Bush. I could just call him. And Fauci misunderstands. Kramer's point was, but you're not being heard and you're not being listened to, which is exactly what we just watched. This entire thing is sad. And at the end of the day, if we are going to stop this in so many areas, this for trans, drag queens, our children in schools, in education, in book bans, in the craziness of what we're watching, ACT UP civil disobedience may be on the horizon as our only solution.
We just watched a mama bear protecting your cubs. That's what I took away from that.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out television network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.